Pastor, I'm so delighted to have you here, and I can't wait to talk about the Johnny Cash book. Before we get into that, your congregation experienced one of the greatest griefs that I've heard in a long time. An associate pastor, just a little over a week ago, took his own life, and that has made national headlines. But on a personal level, it must have been one of the most difficult experiences that you've had to endure as a pastor and as a friend to this young man.
Yes, Governor, it really has been. It came as a shock to us, and this young man's name is Jared Wilson. And he had been struggling with mental illness from his younger days, but was on medication. He was seeing a doctor and was doing so well that he wanted to help other young people who are facing thoughts of depression and suicidal thoughts and such. And I don't know what happened exactly in that night, but something, I think just kind of a mental breakdown of some kind. And so tragically, he took his own life. And it's very hard for us, Governor, because you know, our church it's our family, and our staff is family. So the only thing I could compare this to is when our son died 11 years ago. This is the closest thing I'd say to it, because it was like a member of our family died. But you know, I believe, despite the tragedy of all of this, that one dark moment in the life of a person will not undo what Christ did for us on the cross.
Well, Pastor, our condolences to Jared's family, to the entire congregation out there.
Thank you.
And it's a really perfect segue to talk about the life of Johnny Cash, that you've written this incredible book about his journey and particularly his faith. Johnny Cash lived here in Hendersonville, Tennessee, very, very close to this theater where we do our show. What made you interested in writing a book about Johnny Cash?
Well, I just always was a fan of Johnny Cash, you know, and I grew up really appreciating him. And after I became a Christian in 1970 during the Jesus movement, and I know you were impacted that time in your life as well, I saw I wasn't there, but I heard Johnny Cash singing at Explo.
I was there.
There in Dallas, and Johnny Cash is a Christian. And of course, the other thing we can't forget is Johnny made many appearances at Billy Graham crusades at the height of his popularity. And in fact, Johnny and Billy were good friends. You know, here's the contradiction of Cash. Who could be friends with Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Billy Graham all at the same time? Answer, Johnny Cash.
What did you discover about Johnny Cash that was most surprising?
Well, you know, interesting about Johnny Cash. Sinners thought he was a saint, and saints thought he was a sinner. But whenever he would get into trouble, and Johnny got into a lot of trouble, he was arrested on multiple occasions. Though he never served time in prison, people think he was a prisoner because he sang in prisons, but he did serve jail time. Here's what I discovered. I did not know the depths of his struggle with amphetamines and other substances, but I also learned a lot more about the depth of his faith. You know, Johnny had the devil at his back and an angel on his shoulder and God on speed dial. and he was a man who I would describe as an accessible saint, meaning this: Johnny was a Christian, there's no doubt about that, but he had his ups and downs, his highs and lows. But even when he went astray, he always returned to that bedrock faith that he had going back to the days of picking cotton on the fields there in Arkansas. And so he became a legend, a global legend. Really, he's described as the voice of America, the godfather of cool. Chris Christopherson described Johnny Cash as Abraham Lincoln with a wild side. So he was a contradiction at times, but when it was all said and done, he had a deep faith he always returned to. And I would say that at the beginning of his career, he started off really strong musically, and he ended really strong musically. And the same could be true said of his spiritual life. He started and ended very strong in his faith.
Isn't it great? Because it's all how we end that matters the most. But I think what you've just described is not just Johnny Cash, but Pastor Laurie, that is the life of many of a believer. It's not always easy to walk the life of faith in this world.
No.
And with all the pressures on him, I think we could understand. It's why I think your book is such a gift to the world, because you describe a person who loves God, who is trying to follow Christ, but often finds himself falling off the trail, tumbling down into every kind of ditch imaginable, but at least getting back up and finding his way.
That's true, Governor. And I would say that the real takeaway message of this book is God gives second chances. So if you've messed up, you can get back in the race. Like you said, it's really, when it's all said and done, how you finish the race. I mean, if you're running a 10-lap race and you're running first place for 9 of the laps and you walk off the truck on the 10th lap, you lose. Johnny finished well. He had an incredible resurgence of his career when a producer named Rick Rubin, who had produced a lot of rock acts, went and kind of got Johnny back to his roots and recorded him in his front room with just Johnny and that guitar. Nobody had the voice of Johnny Cash, even the way he played guitar. And I think some of the best songs he ever recorded in his career, including The Man Comes Around, Rusty Cage, and songs he did that other people had written, like I Won't Back Down, and even Personal Jesus, a song that he repurposed. He made them his own, and of course, he was best known for his song Hurt, which was written by a guy named Trent Reznor, but Johnny sort of made it a biographical song as his life was coming to a close. But in a final interview that he did with Kurt Loder of MTV News, this was after his wife June had preceded him to heaven. Kurt asked him, do you have a lapse in your faith? He says, my faith is unshakable. And he was very strong in the end and actually looked forward to going to be with the Lord and being reunited with his wife. So, what a wonderful story it was, and what an adventure it was to discover so much about a true American icon.
The book is called Johnny Cash, The Redemption of an American Icon. You can get it at Amazon, you can get it at other booksellers, or you can find it along with Greg Laurie's other great books, his inspirational messages, and so much more at harvest.org. Also, you can connect with Pastor Laurie on Facebook at harvest.greglaurie and on Twitter at Greg Laurie.